The Allied invasion of Europe was the largest naval force ever assembled in the history of mankind. And I was attached to the American side of it, the American naval forces. I served on the USS Shubrick, a destroyer, which sailed from Londonderry. We arrived off the coast of France at midnight the night before. We dropped anchor 2,000 yards from the beaches. There was a group of 5 destroyers, and after 24 hours we were the only one afloat. So I was a lucky mascot. During the briefing for D-Day in Londonderry, there was all American correspondents. I was the only British correspondent amongst them. At this briefing, you had a blackboard and pictures of the invasion defences. We were then told that where we were going and what we were supposed to do. Each gun was numbered. Each invasion gun on the beach was numbered. We had to knock them out. They also said, well, if things get too difficult and you have to go in and fetch these fellas out, what are you going to do? And he said, well, if it's too bad, we'll go in, pick them up, take them out, turn around and come right back in again. Because this is one-way ticket job. There are no return tickets on this operation. We go in and we stay in. The actual invasion for me started at midnight the night before. I had a grandstand view of the bombing of the beaches, and it was the biggest firework display I've ever seen in my life. And at 4:30 the next morning, all hell broke loose. Every gun there was started to fire. And this kept up for, it seemed, for a hell of a long time. And the shells that came from the major battleships, which were 10 miles behind us, they were the ones that did the damage to the big guns on the shore. And after about 10 o'clock in the morning, the first barges came in. The things that always stand out in my mind about D-Day are the Americans, their little faces and their big helmets. And they died by the thousand. And they didn't know what they were dying for, where they were going. They'd never been to France. And the bodies in the water that were there, and nobody knew who they were, they died by the thousand. Every one of those ships, by the time the day ended, had run out of ammunition. There was nothing left to fire at. There was nothing to fire with. And yet they still kept coming. And yet 3 days later, they still hadn't landed on the beaches. They were still fighting there. They died where they stood, and they died by the thousands.